All right, welcome back. I took a break. I'm sorry if you heard my kids in the background in the last part of the pivot tables. It was getting late last night, and my kids they started screaming, so it was time to put them to bed. And it makes me think, we're all working from home. This is the coronavirus has definitely been an interesting experience for all of us. But I kind of want to show you the journey that I've been on. Maybe take a break from the pivot table and just maybe show you a little bit about my life. So if you look, I'll turn the camera and it's gonna be kind of fuzzy. You can see um, over here I'm in now in like our inventory room where we fulfill all of our orders, and over you can see some more stuff. You might be able to see some face masks in there. Um, so my wife and I quit my job in corporate America in 2018 no 2019 to work on a business with my wife. I was commuting a long time and I always wanted to have my business, so I quit my job and we've just been doing this. Primarily, we were making hair bows, which is all the shelves that you can see over here. Those are all like our baby hair bows and scrunchies and hair products. And then in March, when there was a crisis for face masks, I'm sure you all like remember that we started making and selling face masks, and so that was like a whirlwind for us. It was like six or 8 weeks of just pure craziness, but it was also really awesome for us, and it helped us continue like financially to be able to not have to go back to our job for a little while and work on other businesses. So that's what we're doing, and it is so fun. Okay, now back to Excel. I right here, I just have some questions. The video, the worksheet that you see here is um, is just something that I've taught previously when I talked about pivot tables. So the first example was just pretty basic, and so I wanted to give us at least one more opportunity to work on pivot tables. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have time in class to go over this or not. So this will be a really good thing for you to go over if you want more practice in pivot tables. So the first thing, and I've got questions here. We've got the mainly three questions that we want to answer with this data here. And the first one would be, which products sold the most in Q1 of 2016? So if we look here at our data, we have products, and then we have our dates right here, so our order dates. And if I take a step back just to talk about what is this data set, so this is a data set about product sales. So we have different companies that are selling like our products. So it could be printers, camera, video game consoles. So here's all the companies that are selling the products. Here's the state that they're in and the region that we've categorized them to in our company, theoretically. Here's the salesperson. Here's the product that was sold. And then here is like the month, the quarter, the numerical. So the numerical like representation of the quarter. So this would be the first quarter and the order date. And then we have the ship date, the quantity, the price, and the total sales. One thing that I want you to be aware of, first of all, is that this quantity, they're not in whole numbers, which I'm not sure why. This is a data set like I've used from previous Excel courses that I've taught. This comes with the book, and I'm not sure why they have decimal places, but just to be aware of that, we're going to just move forward with the data the way that it is, and it's going to be great regardless. So this is like our data set. Like I really want you to first like take a step back and think about, what data is available to you in your job, because like this is maybe new to all of us, and you really have to understand the data first before you can use pivot tables. All right, so it's better to be familiar with your data. For me, this is easy because this is just like high level product sales. We have quantity and price and total sales. So like this is stuff I worked with all the time. For me, it's pretty easy. But if it's new to you, you really need to spend some time thinking about the data and like what are the things that you would want to know. And so when you look at stuff like this, we have total sales. One of the questions you could ask yourself is like, what's the total revenue for the entire year? What about per product line? What about per company? So which companies were able to sell the most in the year, or which salespeople are the ones bringing the most revenue to our company, selling the most products? So these are like questions that we can ask about the data, and traditionally it might be hard to figure out. If I were to say, for example, like which salesperson had the highest total sales in that year, we could, and I'll show you this if you're not familiar with it. Assume that there were not filters on here. You could go to data and filter. I'll just turn them off. This is how I do it. Other people do it a different way, which I'll show you. But so go here to filter. So right here, I'll toggle it on and off. I'm going to turn it off, and I'll show you where a lot of people that I know go. So that's under home, and then sort and filter. And I normally just always put a filter on. So if we wanted to know the salesperson that had the highest sales in the year, that actually is going to be quite hard to do, because we would have to, so like, for example, let's just look at Austin here for a second. Austin, look at all of the line items that he sold. He's had a lot of sales. So for us to be able to compare the salespeople, all the salespeople for that year, it's going to be kind of complicated, because we're going to have to go and we're going to find all the sales for Austin. We have to add them up. Then we have to go to the next salesperson, like say Brooks, and we have to find all of his sales and then add them up, and do that for every salesperson to where we can see who sold the most. And really, that's just, it's not fun. Imagine if you had 1,000 salespeople, or 100,000 salespeople, like that. That's an impossible task. But the beauty with pivot tables is that we could find that information out really quickly. So you'll notice offhand that this table, as it's in the spreadsheet that you are given, is already formatted as a table. Just to be aware of that. So let's go and create a pivot table. Go to Insert, Pivot Table. There's also recommended pivot tables. Honestly, out of habit, I never use that. I've always just gone here to pivot tables. But I'll just click. Let's just see what happens when you go to recommended pivot tables. And this will give us some things that we like. Excel will try to assume what we want out of our data. And so it will give us just, here's some options here. I mean, honestly, let's go look at what we can do. I like this one already, the regions and the total sales. So let's just go look at that. So it created a new sheet here. So now we have our new sheet with our pivot table, and it's already created. And that's pretty nice. So now we have our regions and the sum of the total sales. So first, the thing that I want to do is I want to get rid of our decimals and then format this as a currency. So I'll go to home. First, I'll highlight the data that the numbers. And so I'll highlight those, and then I'll just click on the dollar sign here to make it a currency, and then I'll remove the decimals because they don't really mean anything to me at this point. When you're talking about millions of dollars, we don't really care about the 25 cents. So anyway, so we have this pivot table now created. Let's sort it. So I'm going to right click on this column with my total sales, and let's sort it from largest to smallest. And then visually, we can see like, okay, Midwest had the highest, Southwest had the lowest, but I really like to visualize things with a chart. So I normally, when I create a pivot table, I normally will always create a chart, and it's normally just a column chart. So we'll just go here, Insert, and then we can do a column. All right. And then one thing that I also like to do is this total. It doesn't mean much to me because I already know what it does. So if you just click here if I click once inside the pivot table, this is something to be aware of as well. So I click out. If I click once inside the pivot table or the pivot chart, this is the same for any chart. You click once, it highlights the entire chart. If I click again, it will highlight an element within the chart. So like for here, I want the total. I'm just going to push delete, and I'll delete the total. But maybe going more into what I was just telling you about, if I click once into the chart, we select the entire chart. If I click one more time, now I get to select all of the bars and say I wanted to change the color of those. So if I were to right click, now I can change the fill. And if I do that, it will change the fill of all of the bars. Now, if I click one more time, it will just select one of the bars. And then I could individually change the fill of that bar. So that's just something to be aware of with all charts in Excel. You click once, it's like the total chart. You click twice, it's all of the graphs, like the bars or the line or whatever. And if you click one more time, it will select the individual the data point, and then you can modify that. So if we just were looking at here and interpreting the data, we could see that the Midwest and the West had very similar sales, followed by the Southeast and Northeast, which were very similar as well. I mean, in general, all four of these regions had very similar sales. Southwest, that would be something to go look into and figure out, okay, what's going on with Southwest? Why are they not selling as many, as much product or quantity or whatever in that region? All right, so that's a little deviation. What we're going to do is we are going to move on to the question. So which products sold the most in Q1 2016? So we need to create a pivot table for that. And what I'll do is I will just come here and I'm going to just copy it and I'm going to paste this. And then I'll change this pivot table. So let's go look here. So which products sold the most in Q1 of 2016? So if you want, I would pause this video if I were you, and then I would go try to do it myself and figure out, okay, what do I need to do to get this to work? So which product sold the most in Q1? Obviously, I think we would need products. So I'll just click on products and it will put it down here. I don't need the region, so I'm going to select the region down here and I'm just going to remove it. All right. So which products sold the most in Q1 of 2016? So here's all of the products for the entire year. We need to break it down into the quarter. We could use the quarter right here, but I personally don't want to use that because most of the time, so this is the data right here. Most of the time when we have this kind of information, we don't have it broken down into quarters. We would just be given like a date. So if you're working in the university, it could be like the enrollment date or the date that someone signed up for a class or the date the expense was incurred. But normally we're given just a date like this, and we need to figure out how to parse that into a quarter in our pivot table. So that's what I'm going to do in this example. So we're just going to pull the order date, and what should we do? Let's pull it here into our columns. And if you don't like that, you could swap it. So if I pull products over here and I can take the order date, and when I pulled the order date in there, it automatically grouped it into months. Did you see that? I'm going to just undo it and I'll show you. So if I pull products, I'm going to put products back to where it was. I'm basically just going to start over. Okay. So this is where we were. As soon as I pulled the order date in here, it automatically grouped it into months. See that? We don't want months, we want quarters. So if we right click on any of these months right here, I'm just going to right click right here and then group. And honestly, like if you're using pivot tables, like this is something I highly recommend that you get familiar with, is how to group your dates, because it, like, honestly, this is something I use all of the time. So I don't want days or months, I just want quarters. So I'll select the quarters. And now we have all of our quarters. And here's the sales. But the thing is, I only care about quarter one. So I'll just add a filter here. So if I click here on this drop down, filter quarter one. And here we go. Here's all my sales for each product for quarter one. And now I'm just going to sort it from largest to smallest. And I think we've talked about the grand totals before. Normally, when you create a pivot table, they add the grand total in. If you want to get rid of it, if you click anywhere on your pivot table, you can go to Design, Grand Totals, and then I'm just going to turn them off. All right, because I like it clean. Like when I do a pivot table, I like to have it really clean like this to where it's just showing a handful of information, like say one category, which in this case is product, and then maybe one or maybe two values. So right now we have total sales. You might be able to do quantity as well. Maybe we'll do that. Let's just throw quantity in here and we can see what that looks like. It may not actually be something we really want to see. Yeah, that works. So you notice as I pull quantity in here, it's the sum of quantity which we want. We wanted to add all of the quantities up. So for the camera, we did 1,036 units, which was a total sales of $309,000. We don't want dollar signs for our quantities because it's unitless. It's just a unit. It's not a dollar. So I'll come here after I selected my data and just make it a general. And here we go. We have the decimal place for our quantity. So 1,035.7 units were sold. And like I said before, it makes no sense to have half a unit, but that's just how the data set is that I've got right here. All right, so let's look at this now. Which product sold the most in Q1 of 2016? We now know that it's the camera. And then the last was the printers. So people didn't want to buy printers for some reason. Now let's go and create our bar chart for this. So I'll click anywhere in my pivot table and I will just come here to my column chart. This is actually a really cool place to talk about something that I don't know if we're going to cover in class. But if you look, we have our quantities here and we have total sales. Well, if we look at our chart, we can't see our total sales. And that's because if we look at the magnitude, we have it's 1,000 here versus 309,000. So it's all plotted on the same scale, and 1,000 is negligible when we're talking at hundreds of thousands. And so our data is actually plotted in here. It's just so small we can't see it. And this is one of my favorite things to be able to do, and the newer versions of Excel make it so much easier, and that is to add a second axis. So if we were to, let's see, I'll just double click on my chart. So that's all I did. I double click on my chart, and honestly, I always forget which button it is. So you can just click here. Like this is going to format our chart. We don't want that. This is another formatting. If we click on the properties one, let's go here. That's not that one. So let's see. We want to be able to add maybe I have to click on a data point. So let's do that. Let's click on maybe one of these bars. Yeah, see, that's actually going to change. So we want to click on one of our data series. So we'll click on one of these data points. And now the menu changes here to where we have series options. What we want, now we have a primary and secondary axis. We just need to put one of the data series into a secondary axis. So I'll do this. And now we have two axes. Over here you can see these are just in thousands. So the blue is the sum of our quantity, which would correspond to this axis. And then here we have our total sales, which we know if we look here is the red, the sum of our total sales, and that axis is here. So now we can see all of the data on one chart. Unfortunately, like this, our blue bars here are being covered by our total revenue. So we could go and change that if we wanted, like if we clicked on our data. So right here we have this overlap. So we can play with some of these overlaps right here. Let's see if it will work. The gap width. Let's see, it's not updating. Oh, here we go. So let's see. If we make one of these bars a lot skinnier, it will help us to be able to see that data. So if we did something like that, and we don't, let's see, this is all just like we can play with the data and make it look better. So maybe we can make the gap width on this wider. So now we could see the data for both of them. Honestly, when I'm doing this, I would actually prefer to have two different chart types. So what I would do here, I'll just click on the red ones. If I right click here, I can change the series chart type. And I normally just want to make that into a line. So I'll come up here to a line chart and do that. Oh, it made it both of them. Let's see, I don't want this to be a line. Maybe it moved it onto a, yeah. So it automatically changed our axes. I think I might have had both of them selected. So I'm going to try that one more time. I'm going to just select the blue line here. And I'm going to change the series chart type to a, oh, so this is what I made a mistake on. I went up here and just changed the line. And right here, what we really want is a combo, where a combo basically means we're going to have a chart with different type of charts in it. And so it gives us this option here, and this is nice. I'm just not as used to this because at work I was using Excel 2010, and this was definitely not an option then. So right here we have the sum of our quantity, and that's a line. And then we have our sum of total sales. Let's make that into a column chart, and let's put that onto our secondary axis. And so it makes it super easy. And now this is what we want to see, something like this, to where we have our total sales and then the sum of our quantity here. And it's easy to differentiate which is which. And I just feel like this is a way cleaner graph. If we were having to show that to like our boss or the CEO or the dean of the university, like this is a chart that is easily presentable to somebody like that without them being confused. So that's the question to our first, or the answer to our first question. So now let's go and say, how did total product sales change from month to month in 2016? Quarter to, and then we can say maybe we'll just do quarter to quarter. So we're going to change, yeah. So how did total product sales change from quarter to quarter? All right, so what we'll do is I'm actually going to just come here and I'm going to copy this pivot table and I'm going to just paste it down here. And now I have my bare bones pivot table. And what do we want to see? We want to see total product sales. How did that change from quarter to quarter? So when I'm here in my pivot table, we still have our shape formatting, so we need to close out of that. We can close it here, or we could just come to the button. If you look where my mouse is, I could just click on that, and it should toggle between my field list or my chart tools. So I'm going to just come here and click on my pivot table fields. And I don't need my products because I just care about total sales. And so we just want quarters and our total sales. So what we're going to do, and I'm just going to start over. I'll delete this. So now we have a blank pivot table. What we want, let's add our order date. And then we're going to add our total sales. One thing to be aware of, when we're doing this in Excel, they basically combine our pivot tables, like the filters that we apply. So up here, we filter just quarter one. If I go and unfilter it, maybe I'll just select all. A lot of times will force the filters on our other pivot tables. So let's go see. We're going to just uncheck that. And it actually didn't do that here, which is really nice to see. So we can actually just show quarter one, for example, here. And it's not going to change that here. And pretty soon I'm going to show you a way that we can force that connection, which can be super useful. All right, so now we're going to look at how did total sales change from quarter to quarter. Let's go and add a chart. So I'm going to add a line chart for this one. So now we can see how total sales. I'm going to get rid of the total here just because it forces my chart to be a little smaller than I want it to be. And now we can see how our total sales have changed from quarter to quarter. Quarter 2 was the best and quarter 4 was the worst, which is actually maybe backwards to a lot of retail type sales. So, okay, that's the answer to our second question. And then which salesperson sold the most in the year and the least? So we're going to add one more pivot table. We're going to figure out, okay, which salesperson sold the most? And I could, if I wanted, and not create all these extra pivot tables. You don't have to, but I'm doing it for one reason, and I'll show you in a minute when we get these all created. So now we want to see which salesperson sold the most. So I don't need the order date. I'll just pull it out. And let's go pull salesperson in here. And once we get that, I will sort it from high to low. So largest to smallest. And then I'm going to add a chart. This one I'll just do a column chart. Whoa. Why did I say whoa? I mean, really, these salespeople were all doing a really good job. I mean, there's not a lot of data that's like sticking out that someone was exceptionally better or exceptionally worse. So that's a interesting thing to see. And then, so we have the highest, which would be Austin, and the lowest was Powell. And then here's the last task. We have all of these charts. I'm going to go start naming what these are. So we could say total sales by region. And I'm going to come and select this one and just make it red like everything else, because I don't want it to be different. All right, so then that was the total sales by region. And then we have this. I'm going to just sort it. I'm going to filter it again and get rid of all my other quarters. So I just have quarter 1. That way my chart is easier to look at. So here we have our, what is this? Our total sales by product. So as you see here, I don't have a place to put my title. So if I click on my chart, I think right here we should be able to, when you click on this add, we should be able to add a chart title. And it should add one in for us. Oh, that's an axis title. Let's go here. Let's see. Chart title. There we go. So now we have product sales. Maybe it'd be total product sales. Oh, one thing to be aware of. Look, notice how when I unfiltered our data, that it took away our line, and I'm not sure why it's doing that. Personally, I'm not real pleased to see that happened, but I'll come back here. I'll click on that one data point, and I'm going to just change it to a line, and I'm going to add one to a secondary axis. So now we have our chart like this. All right, so we have our total sales by region, our total product sales, and then we have our quarter sales. And then we have the last one, which is the salespeople total sales. All right, now what we're going to do here is something really cool. I'm going to close this. So now we have all of these charts, and they're basically individual. And if we wanted to create like a dashboard, this is what I would do a lot of times. I would just move the charts, and I would cover the data. And because we don't really need to see the data, we really just care about the charts. I mean, assuming that we're just creating a dashboard. So we can have our 4 charts. You could also copy these and paste them onto a different sheet, and that would work as well. So we could have something like this. It's not very pretty, but now we can find a way to link all of these together. So I'm just going to go look back at our sheet. We could link it by our companies here. We could link it by state, by region, by salesperson, by product. So what we want to do is I'm just arbitrarily going to say I want to be able to filter our data based on the salesperson and the product. And you could really do that for the quarter or for the company name or the state. And you'll see here in a second what I'm talking about. If I were to click on any of these charts and come up to, I think, Pivot Chart Analyze, I think you can also right click on your chart and let's see, it should be in here somewhere. I'm not seeing it. All right, so the best thing is going to be to just click on our chart and then right here, insert slicer. And you'll see here in a second what this means. So we have company name. Let's not do company name. Let's just do our region, our salespeople, and our product. Let's do all three of those. As soon as I click that, look what happens. I get these basically buttons that I can use. I'm going to expand this out to make sure I can see all my salespeople. Okay, I can see all of my salespeople now. I know this is kind of fast. You wouldn't ever want to create a slicer on something that had 1,000 different options because you want to make it easy for people to be able to just click and compare your data. So now if I were to click on any of these, for example, my region, when I click my region, it automatically updates this chart to show me just the Northeast information. So what sales I had in the Northeast. So I can click right here on the little filter with the X and that will clear the filter and so I can see everything. If I wanted to just see maybe camera, if I click on camera here, now it filters my data, only show me the sales data for the cameras. And then similarly, if I were to click on, say, a salesperson, it will only show me the data for that salesperson. Now, the thing is, this is only controlling that one chart we selected when we created, and these are called slicers. If we were to click on one of these slicers, and then we should be able to go, you can right click on the slicer. I know you can do that. Right here it says report connections. So there's that, and there's also it here in the menu as well. So if you click in here, under the slicer menu, you have the report connections. If you click on this, this shows us all of our pivot tables. If I were to select all these pivot tables and push OK, now anytime I select a slicer, it will control all 4 of those charts for me. And that's so nice. It's super nice. So now I'm just going to get rid of the filter on that, and then I'm going to do the same thing with products. So I'll right click on this one, and I'll go to report connections here, and I'm going to select all my pivot tables. And then I'm going to do the same for my region. Report connections, pivot tables. We're going to do that. So now all 3 of my slicers are connected to each of my charts. So if I only wanted to see sale information for the Northeast, maybe you were the Northeast manager, you could click on this and you would see only the information for your region. And say like from a university setting, say this could be, instead of region, it could be like the college or the department, and you could go and look at each department individually, and you could see like total students enrolled and things like that. So I think this is really fun to be able to do, and this would be like the very first steps toward a dashboard. So I mean, I think it's fun to be able to do this. Now the question is like, you might be asking like, okay, this is cool. Does it apply to me? And I was talking to somebody in the department earlier today, and they were wondering the same thing. Like, pivot tables are cool, but do they actually apply to me? And the thing I would say is that pivot tables will apply to you if your data changes um, in a way that is like hard to manage manually. Meaning, if you were, say, the head of the entire college, um, and there were 10,000 students in the college, and you were trying to manage and understand like how many students do we have in each class, how many students in each department, um, then like something like this would work really well. If you're just like dealing with transactions that are maybe like looking at data that doesn't change like on a very frequent basis, and it's pretty static, that maybe you only have to do it once in the semester, then pivot tables may not be the best for you, because it's really beneficial if you have first like data from a database. And I've taught other classes to people from the U who have a lot of data from databases, and they would be able to pivot stuff like this. But if you're just looking at spreadsheets that don't change very often, a pivot table may not. I mean, I would create it just for the experience to learn how to use them, but they're not going to save you a ton of time. Um, so that's, I think, the big thing there is that if you have a lot of data that's changing, or people are adding, students keep coming, people are changing, like, yeah, more students are being enrolled or whatever that is, um, and you're constantly having to update your spreadsheet and create charts and reports that are just changing all the time, like that's a pretty good sign that you should be thinking about how to use a pivot table for the application. Because like the real beauty on this is that once you set up all of your charts and things that you would need from like a day-to-day management point of view, as we were to add more, so if we were to come here and we were to add more data points, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. And so this is me just saying maybe we're adding more data points, and I'm going to copy it and paste it here. And then instead of, let's see, I'm trying to think of how to change the dates so they it's just something different for you. Like, okay, so this is gonna be a little random, but I'm going to just say this date here. I'm gonna just go and find a date somewhere up here. This is totally arbitrary. I'm just creating like random dates with the like simulation that time has passed and we're adding more lines to it. So I'm gonna just add a calendar year, so 365 days to this date, and I'm going to just copy all this down. So now we have a bunch of random dates, and yeah. So now if I were to go back to my pivot table, and the only thing I wanted to just to see is that if you're to add more lines of data to your pivot table, the only thing that we have to do now is refresh our pivot table. So if I go to data here and I go refresh all, you see how that changed? I don't know if you saw that. Let's see, let me undo that if it will work. I'll refresh. See how my sales have changed? Now my quarterly sales, instead of being the highest in the second quarter, oh, I did Control Z one too many times. Let's see. I have to go back here. I undid, I think my I undid my formula here. I did Control Z one too many times. So let's go copy this down. Uh-oh, my Excel's being super slow. Okay. So now I'm getting all my dummy dates again. I'm going to go back to my pivot table. I'll refresh it and see my chart's updated. I'll do Control Z just to show you again. Now I refresh it and see how it changes. So now all of that new data is pulled into my pivot tables. I don't have to create a chart again. And that's like the real beauty of a pivot table, and having all this connected from the base of like an actual, like what we call the table here, is that if we ever have to add new data, whether that's just manual entry or we get like a data dump from a database for somebody else, the only thing that we have to do is just refresh our pivot tables, and it already incorporates all of that new data. So I think it's really cool. All right. The last thing that I'm going to show you, and I'm sorry, like I'm totally just, I feel like I'm just, I don't know, vomiting data. I know it's like a fire hose. There's so much here. And I really hope that you find some of this to be useful for you. This is a newer feature as well. It's like a slicer. So if I click on a chart, and I go to the pivot chart analyze, there's a timeline. And I can do a timeline based off of like the order date. And you'll see what this is like. So basically, I'm just expanding it. It allows me, if I just to click on this, it allows me to, if I click and drag, I can select multiple dates. And this is a way to just filter the chart that I see based off of this slider. And if I were to right click on this, there's also report connections. So I can connect all of my charts with this as well, which is really nice. So we have so you see as I just play around with this, it's changing. It's just changing the data that I'm seeing. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, I think that's going to be it for pivot tables. Like I said, I hope that you find this useful. I just know that we don't have a lot of time in class to talk about pivot tables, and in my opinion, once you learn pivot tables, they can be so powerful for you. And just like understand, when I was in graduate school and I was being taught pivot tables in my MBA, I didn't understand it at first. It took me a couple years after I graduated and I was playing around in Excel to where I actually needed them, and I had to go figure it out again. And I fell in love with them because they can make your job so much easier depending on what you're doing. And just like my personal experience, I went from like being just like an engineer, and I learned how to do pivot tables. I became really good at Excel. People from like the entire company were asking me like how to do pivot tables and stuff like that, and that got me promoted. So they promoted me to the head of our scheduling department, which was super data heavy. And most of the exposure I had that allowed me to get promoted was because people knew that I was good at Excel and I was good at pivot tables. So I think it can be a worthwhile thing for you to learn. I guess once you do learn, be careful who you tell, because you might have people coming to you all the time for help with pivot tables. I think that's a good problem to have as you learn how to add more value to your department or your company. It can maybe give you opportunities to get promoted or just to gain new skills, make your job easier. So I hope you find this useful. And again, tomorrow is a class. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope it's going to be beneficial for all of us. It's really short. It's an hour and a half to cover a ton of concepts. So I hope you can just find at least something out of what we're going to talk about. So anyway, thanks for sticking to this. If you stuck all the way to the end, I know this is running long. Well, congratulations for that. And I hope in all of this, you learned something that can help you in your job. And that's my real goal, is like, I don't care that you just know how to do pivot table. Like if you find one thing that can save you hours of time, then I've done my job. And I'm just going to just keep going on for a second, but so many people think spreadsheets are just terrible. And that's because they're doing it the manual way. And once you learn some of the faster ways to use spreadsheets, like there's things that you can do that can take, things that took days, you can do in a matter of minutes. And pivot tables can really help do with stuff like that. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to be done talking from now. And yeah, thanks. I hope you find this useful.